I should have trusted my instincts the moment I saw the seating card with my name on it. That night, surrounded by crystal chandeliers and women draped in designer gowns, I realized I wasn't invited to network. I was invited to witness something, or worse, to take the fall for it. The red wine in my glass looked like blood under those lights, and when Margaret Chen leaned over with that perfectly practiced smile and whispered, "You must be wondering why you're really here," my entire body went cold. Because I was wondering, and the answer, when it finally came, would shatter everything I thought I knew about the company I'd given 7 years of my life to. But let me start at the beginning. Let me tell you how a simple email destroyed my sense of safety forever. 3 weeks before that dinner, I was just trying to survive another Monday. My alarm went off at 6:30, the same tinny beeping that had woken me every workday for the past 7 years. I reached over, slapped it silent, and stared at the ceiling of my small apartment. The morning light was filtering through the gaps in my curtains, painting everything in that soft, hazy gold that makes you think, just for a second, that today might be different. It never was. I worked at Hartley and Associates, one of those corporate law firms that sounds prestigious when you say it at parties but feels like slow suffocation when you're living it. I was a senior paralegal, which meant I did all the work of an attorney for about half the pay and none of the recognition. But I was good at it. Really good. I knew every case file, every precedent, every loophole. I'd built my entire identity around being indispensable. That morning, I made my coffee in the little French press I'd bought myself after my last breakup, got dressed in my usual uniform of black slacks and a neutral blouse, and caught the 7:45 train downtown. The commute was always the same. 40 minutes of watching other people's faces, everyone looking equally exhausted, equally trapped. When I got to the office, my desk was exactly as I'd left it. Stacks of case files, sticky notes covering my monitor, and a wilting succulent that I kept forgetting to water. My cubicle was tucked in the back corner of the paralegal pool, far enough from the windows that I needed my desk lamp on, even at noon. I was 3 coffees deep into reviewing a deposition transcript when my email pinged. The sound made my stomach drop before I even looked at the screen. That particular ping, the one that came from the executive suite, always meant trouble. I clicked over, and there it was. From Victoria Hartley, managing partner. Subject, wives' dinner. Your attendance required. My hands actually shook as I opened it. "Dear Sarah," it began, and I could practically hear Victoria's clipped, imperious voice in my head. "As you know, Hartley and Associates hosts an annual wives' dinner for our senior partners' spouses. This year, due to some last-minute cancellations and the importance of maintaining our table arrangement, your attendance is required. The dinner will be held at the Sterling Club on Saturday, November 18th at 7 p.m. Formal attire. Please confirm your attendance by end of business today." I read it 3 times. The wives' dinner was legendary at our firm, but not in a good way. It was this archaic tradition where all the senior partners brought their wives, got drunk on expensive wine, and pretended they were still living in the 1950s. As paralegals, as staff, we'd always joked about it. We'd heard the stories, the gossip that flowed as freely as the champagne, the passive-aggressive competitions over whose husband was more successful, whose children were more accomplished, whose life was more picture-perfect. But staff were never invited. Never. I was single, for one thing. I wasn't anybody's wife, and I was just a paralegal. I didn't belong in that world of country club memberships and vacation homes in the Hamptons. I walked over to Monica's desk. She was the only person in the office I actually trusted. Monica had been at the firm for 12 years, and she'd seen everything. "Did you get one of these?" I asked, showing her my phone. She looked at the email, and her expression went from confusion to concern. "Sarah, that's weird." "Weird how?" "Weird as in they've never asked a staff member to attend. Ever." She lowered her voice. "And why you? Why now?" That's what I'm wondering. Monica glanced around to make sure no one was listening. You've been working on the Donovan case, right? The Donovan case. Of course. I'd been buried in it for months. James Donovan was a tech CEO accused of embezzling millions from his own company. It was a massive case, the kind that could make or break careers. And I'd found something. A trail of offshore accounts that didn't quite add up. Transactions that seemed designed to be invisible. I'd flagged it to my supervising attorney, Robert Chen, but he told me to keep it quiet. We need to verify everything before we make accusations, he'd said. Don't mention this to anyone. That was 2 weeks ago. You think this is related? I asked Monica. I don't know, but be careful at that dinner, Sarah. These people, they don't do anything without a reason. The next few days were strange. I kept working on the Donovan case, but I noticed things. Small things that individually meant nothing, but together they formed a pattern. Robert Chen stopped making eye contact with me. When I brought him updates, he'd barely look up from his computer. Just email me, he'd say, waving me away. Victoria Hartley walked past my desk twice in 1 week. The managing partner never came to the paralegal pool. Never. But there she was, her heels clicking on the tile floor, her eyes sliding over me like I was something she was evaluating. And then there was Margaret Chen, Robert's wife. I'd met Margaret exactly once before, at a firm holiday party 3 years ago. She was the kind of woman who looked like she'd stepped out of a luxury magazine. Perfect blonde highlights, clothes that probably cost more than my monthly rent, a smile that never quite reached her eyes. On Thursday, she showed up at the office. I was getting coffee in the break room when I heard her voice in the hallway. "Robert, darling, I'll only be a moment." She appeared in the doorway and her gaze landed directly on me. "You must be Sarah," she said, her smile sharp and bright. "I am." My coffee cup felt suddenly very hot in my hands. "I hear you'll be joining us at the wives' dinner. How exciting." She stepped closer and I caught the scent of her perfume. Something expensive and slightly overwhelming. It's such an intimate gathering. We really get to know each other. There was something in the way she said intimate that made my skin crawl. "I'm looking forward to it," I lied. "Oh, I'm sure you are." She tilted her head, studying me like I was a puzzle she was trying to solve. "You've been working so hard on that Donovan case. Robert says you're very thorough." My heart started beating faster. "Just doing my job." "Of course." Her smile didn't waver. "Well, I'll see you Saturday. Don't be late. We have so much to discuss." She left, and I stood there holding my coffee, trying to understand what had just happened. Margaret Chen knew about the Donovan case. Why would Robert tell his wife about an active case? That violated about a dozen confidentiality protocols. That night, I couldn't sleep. I lay in bed, staring at the shadows on my ceiling, running through everything in my mind. The email, the dinner, Margaret's visit, the offshore accounts I'd found. At 2 in the morning, I got up and opened my laptop. I pulled up the Donovan files I'd copied to my personal drive, the ones I'd made as backup. I went through them again, line by line, transaction by transaction. And that's when I saw it. One of the offshore accounts had a secondary signer, someone who could authorize transactions, someone who wasn't James Donovan. Robert Chen. My supervising attorney had access to the embezzled funds. I slammed my laptop shut so hard I thought I'd crack the screen. My hands were shaking, my mind was racing. If Robert was involved, if he was actually part of the embezzlement scheme, then everything made sense. He told me to keep quiet because he needed time. Time to cover his tracks. Time to figure out what to do about me. And the dinner. Oh, God, the dinner! I wasn't invited to network. I was invited because they needed to know what I knew. They needed to figure out if I was a threat. Or they needed to make sure I became one. Friday at work was a nightmare. I went through the motions, responding to emails, filing documents, but I couldn't focus. Every time Robert walked by, my entire body tensed. Every time the phone rang, I was convinced it was someone calling to fire me. Or worse, I thought about going to the police, but with what? I had documents I'd technically stolen by copying them to my personal drive. I had suspicions based on one transaction that by itself proved nothing. Robert could explain it away easily. Just a clerical error. Sarah must have misunderstood. I thought about not going to the dinner, but the email had said required. And if I didn't show up, they'd know I suspected something. They'd know I was afraid. I was trapped. Monica found me in the bathroom at 4 o'clock. I was standing at the sink, running cold water over my wrists, trying to calm down. Sarah, she locked the door behind her. Talk to me. And I did. I told her everything. The offshore pounce, Robert's name on the transactions, Margaret's visit, my suspicion that the dinner was some kind of setup. Monica listened, her face getting paler with every word. When she finished, she grabbed my shoulders. You need to record everything tomorrow night. What? Your phone. Keep the voice memo app running. If they say anything incriminating, you'll have proof. Real proof. The kind you can take to the authorities. Monica, I can't. Yes, you can. Because if you're right, if Robert is involved and they know you know, then you're in danger. Real danger. You need insurance. That night, I barely slept again. I kept thinking about Margaret's smile, about Victoria's email, about Robert's sudden distance. I thought about the way powerful people protect themselves, the way they make problems disappear. Was I about to become a problem that needed disappearing? Saturday arrived with the kind of crisp November cold that feels like a warning. I spent most of the day in a fog of anxiety. I tried on 4 different dresses before settling on a simple black cocktail dress I'd worn to a friend's wedding 2 years ago. It felt like armor. I put on makeup, did my hair, sprayed perfume. I was putting on a costume, preparing for a performance. At 6:30, I called an Uber. My hands were shaking as I put my phone in my clutch. I'd already started the voice recording app. Just like Monica had told me, my phone was on silent, hidden in the inner pocket of my bag, recording everything. The Sterling Club was in the kind of neighborhood where even the trees looked expensive. Old money. Real estate that had been in families for generations. The building itself was all white columns and subtle lighting, elegant in that way that whispers wealth rather than shouting it. I walked up the steps, my heels clicking on the marble. A doorman in white gloves opened the door. Good evening, miss. Name? Sarah Bennett. He checked his list and something flickered across his face. Surprise, maybe? Or pity? Right this way. He led me through a lobby that looked like something from a museum. Crystal chandeliers, oil paintings in gilded frames, floors so polished I could see my reflection. And then we entered the dining room. The first thing I noticed was the silence. Not real silence. There was music playing softly, that kind of instrumental jazz that's designed to be background noise. There were women talking in small clusters, champagne glasses in their hands. But underneath it all was this oppressive quiet, the kind of silence that comes from secrets, from things left unsaid. The second thing I noticed was how everyone looked at me. 12 women, all dressed in gowns that probably cost more than my car, all turning simultaneously to stare at the outsider who'd crashed their exclusive club. Sarah! Victoria Hartley materialized beside me, her hand on my elbow. So glad you could make it. Let me introduce you. She steered me through the room, rattling off names I immediately forgot. Olivia, the plastic surgeon's wife. Diane, married to a hedge fund manager. Catherine, whose husband owned a pharmaceutical company, and Margaret Chun, who watched me approach with that same sharp smile. "We've met," Margaret said. "How lovely that you could join us, Sarah." The way she said my name made it sound like an accusation. "Thank you for having me," I managed. Victoria guided me to my seat. The table was set with more silverware than I had ever seen at one place setting. The wine glasses gleamed under the chandelier light. My place card was positioned directly opposite Margaret. Of course it was. As we sat down, as the waiters brought out the first course, small plates of something that looked like art and tasted like nothing, the conversation began. Surface level. Safe. They talked about charity galas and vacation plans and their children's private schools, but I could feel it. The undercurrent. The real conversation happening beneath the polite words. Margaret kept watching me. So did Victoria, and two other women whose names I had already forgotten. We were halfway through the second course when Margaret set down her fork and looked directly at me. "Sarah, you must be wondering why you're here." The table went silent. My heart was pounding so hard I could hear it in my ears. I assumed it was for networking. "Networking," Margaret smiled. "That's one word for it. Tell me, how is the Donovan case progressing?" Every woman at the table was watching me now, waiting. "I'm not really at liberty to discuss active cases," I said carefully. "Of course not. Professional ethics." Margaret took a sip of her wine. "But you've been working on it for months. You must have formed some opinions." This was it. This was the trap. They wanted to know what I knew. They wanted to hear me say it out loud so they could plan accordingly. "I think," I said slowly, "that it's a complex case. There are a lot of moving pieces." "Moving pieces," Victoria repeated. "Such as?" I looked around the table at these women with their perfect hair and their expensive jewelry and their carefully constructed lives. And I realized something. They were scared. Not of me, but of what I represented. The possibility that their world, built on their husbands' money and reputations, could come crashing down. Such as offshore accounts and secondary signers who shouldn't have access to funds. The silence that followed was suffocating. Margaret's smile finally disappeared. "That's a very serious accusation." "It's not an accusation, it's an observation based on financial records. Records that you, as a paralegal, shouldn't have access to. Records that are part of the case I was assigned to work on." Victoria leaned forward. "Sarah, we invited you here tonight because we need to understand something. We need to know if you're going to be a problem." There it was, the truth, finally spoken out loud. "A problem for whom?" I asked, my voice steadier than I felt. "For everyone at this table." Margaret's voice had gone cold. "Our husbands work very hard. They've built successful careers, successful lives, for their families. And sometimes, in the course of business, there are arrangements made, accommodations, things that to an outsider might look questionable. Things like embezzlement," I said. Olivia, the plastic surgeon's wife, actually gasped. Margaret's expression hardened. "Things like strategic financial planning that someone without full context might misinterpret." I have plenty of context. I have months of documents, transactions, patterns, and I have Robert's name on accounts that he shouldn't have access to. "You have nothing," Victoria said sharply. "You have copies of files that you made without authorization. Evidence obtained improperly. Inadmissible in any court." She was right, and she knew it, and she knew that I knew it. But here's what we have, Margaret said, her voice soft and dangerous. We have resources, connections. We have lawyers who are much better than you at playing these games. And we have a story about an obsessive paralegal who became fixated on a case, who started making wild accusations, who stole confidential documents, who had to be let go for erratic behavior. My blood went cold. You're threatening me. We're offering you a choice, Victoria corrected. You can walk away from this, from the case, from the firm. We'll give you 6 months severance and a neutral reference. You can find another job, start over. Or you can pursue this and we will destroy you. Your reputation, your career, your entire future. Because that's what we do. We protect our families. I looked around the table again, at these women who'd been complicit for years, who'd looked the other way while their husbands bent rules and broke laws, who'd built their identities on money that, in some cases, wasn't earned honestly. And I thought about Margaret's words. We protect our families. But what about the families that were destroyed? The investors who'd lost everything in Donovan's scheme. The employees who'd lost their jobs and their pensions. What about justice? No, I said. The word fell like a stone into water. No, Margaret repeated. No, I'm not walking away. I'm not letting this go. And I'm not letting you intimidate me into silence. Victoria's face went pale. Sarah, you're making a terrible mistake. Maybe, but it's my mistake to make. I stood up, my chair scraping against the floor. The sound was deafening in the silence. Oh, and one more thing, I said, pulling my phone from my clutch. I recorded this entire conversation. Every word, every threat. And if anything happens to me, if I suddenly get fired, or have an accident, or become erratic, this recording goes to the police, to the state bar, to every news outlet in the city. I watched the blood drain from their faces. Margaret's hand was shaking as she reached for her wine glass. You're bluffing. Try me. I walked out of that dining room with my head high and my knees weak, past the doorman, down the marble steps, into the cold November night. And I didn't stop walking until I was 6 blocks away, standing on a random street corner, gasping for air like I'd been underwater. My phone was still recording, still capturing everything. I'd done it. I'd actually done it. But I also knew this was only the beginning. The real battle was just starting. The next 3 months were the hardest of my life. I went to the police the Monday after the dinner. I brought everything, the financial documents, the recordings, my testimony. They listened, they investigated, and slowly, piece by piece, the truth came out. Robert Chen was arrested 2 weeks later. He'd been helping Donovan hide funds, taking a percentage for himself. A partnership built on greed and criminality. But here's the thing they didn't expect. I didn't go down with them. Yes, I'd made unauthorized copies of files. Yes, I recorded a conversation without consent. But I also uncovered actual crimes, real fraud. And when the dust settled, when the prosecutors reviewed everything, they offered me immunity in exchange for my testimony. I testified at Robert's trial. I sat in that courtroom and told the truth about everything I'd found. Every transaction, every red flag, every moment I'd been threatened and intimidated. Margaret Chen sat in the gallery, watching me with pure hatred in her eyes. But she couldn't touch me. Not anymore. Robert was convicted. Sentenced to 8 years. James Donovan got 15. Victoria Hartley resigned from the firm to focus on her family, which was corporate speak for before the state bar investigates me too. The firm offered me my job back, a promotion even, a title, money, an office with a window. I turned it down because I'd learned something important during those 3 months. I'd learned that I didn't need their validation. I didn't need to be indispensable to people who'd throw me away the second I became inconvenient. I found a new job at a nonprofit legal aid clinic. The pay is less, the office is smaller, but the work matters. We help people who can't afford lawyers, people who've been cheated and lied to and pushed around by people with more power and money. People like I almost became. Monica left the firm too. We got an apartment together, actually. Two women who decided they'd rather struggle with integrity than thrive with compromise. And the wives' dinner? I heard through the grapevine that they canceled it. Permanently. Turns out that when you build a tradition on secrets and complicity, it doesn't survive exposure to sunlight. Sometimes I think about that night. The crystal and the silk and the polished knives disguised as smiles. I think about how close I came to taking their offer, to walking away, to letting fear make my decisions for me. I'm glad I didn't. Because here's what I know now. Your voice, your truth, your refusal to be silenced, these are the most powerful weapons you have. And when you use them, when you stand up, even when you're terrified, even when you're outnumbered, you win. Maybe not immediately, maybe not easily, but eventually, you win. I still have the recording from that dinner on my phone. Sometimes when I doubt myself, when I wonder if I did the right thing, I listen to it. I hear Margaret's threats, Victoria's coldness, the moment I said no. And I remember who I am. I remember that I'm someone who fought back. Someone who refused to be a victim or a witness to injustice. Someone who chose the hard right over the easy wrong. I'm someone who survived the wives' dinner and came out stronger on the other side. Walking away from that table was the hardest thing I ever did, but also the most necessary. If this story reminded you of your own strength, if you've ever faced a room full of people trying to intimidate you into silence, hit the like button to claim that power back. Remember, you deserve a career that values your integrity, not your compliance. You deserve to work for people who see your courage as an asset, not a threat. And you deserve to know that speaking truth to power isn't naive or reckless. It's the bravest thing you can do. Subscribe to Her Confessions and turn on notifications for your weekly dose of courage and rebirth. Because every week, we share stories of women who refuse to stay silent, women who fought back, women just like you. Until next time, stay strong.